Good morning. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we meet and we learn from each other on country. I'm coming to you from the State Library of New South Wales, and so I am on Gadigal land. This comparatively young library sits on one of the world's great ancient libraries, a rich repository of oral tradition. Here in the beautiful Donald and Mathanwy Horn Room, I'm also in the Mitchell Wing made out of Sydney sandstone, so very much in country as well. I pay my sincere respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us this morning for our May Scholar Talk. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel Franks and I'm the Coordinator of Scholarship here at the State Library of New South Wales. And on the first Tuesday of the month, we always feature one of our fellows or one of our visiting scholars to celebrate what they've been doing here at the library as part of their research. Monique Rooney is a teacher of English literature at the Australian National University, and she was our 2023 Nancy Keesing AM Fellow. And she was looking into the life of Australian author Ruth Park. And I remember quite clearly when we were reading her application again in the judging committee, and we're all quite stunned that nobody had done a full-length biography of a name that many of us take for granted. Some of us will have read her books and loved them, but most of us will at least know her name. So Monique is actually doing that. She's doing this fabulous work on Ruth Park, a name that we recognise, but a woman whose achievements we may not fully appreciate. So to talk about Ruth Park and some of the extraordinary things that she's done, please welcome Monique Rooney. Thanks, Monique.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll share my screen first. I'd like to begin by paying my respects to the Ngambri and Ngunnawal peoples of the Canberra region. I also acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose lands I have been researching the Ruth Park papers held in the Mitchell Library. I acknowledge all First Nations people on whose traditional lands we live and work. I would like to thank Rachel Franks, Richard Neville, and the other dedicated staff members of the State Library of New South Wales. As Rachel mentioned, I was privileged to be last year's Nancy Keesing Fellow, which involved living in Sydney for 6 months while I researched Park's papers in preparation for writing a literary biography. And as Rachel said, it is indeed the first one. Park penned a 2-volume autobiography in the 1990s, but there's yet to be a comprehensive biography of her. With permission from Park's son and literary executor, Rory Nyland, I plan to approach her life through her work, steering clear of a conventional biography and opting instead for a literary interpretation of her life as written through both her published and unpublished work. This talk zooms in on a particular aspect of Park's papers. That is, I focus on her trans-Tasman correspondence with Australian writer Darcy Nyland as a gateway to exploring their distinctive intimacy as it was fostered through mutual support and equality, ultimately leading to their marriage and serving as the foundation for their life of collaborative professional writing. Darcy Nyland is best known for his novel The Shirley, 1955, which achieved international acclaim and was adapted into a successful film starring Peter Finch. Park's correspondence with Nyland, her initial correspondence at least, spans from 1937 until 1942, a period that coincides with the tumultuous early years of World War II. The letters offer insights into the diverse ways in which the two writers grapple with and reflect upon their experiences of war. While Nyland, a pacifist, vehemently expresses his anti-war sentiments, the correspondence also sheds light on his evasion of war service, a facet that Park notably excludes from her published memoirs. However, my talk today focuses on what this trans-Tasman exchange of letters offers into the burgeoning love affair between Park and Nyland, an affair grounded in their shared passion for writing. Notably, this was a relationship that blossomed through the medium of letters, with Park fondly describing their intimate correspondence as a quote-unquote inky comradeship. Their correspondence not only discusses their love for literature, but also highlights the foundational role of letter writing in initiating their courtship. I'll share insights from these letters, although they are marked as restricted, limiting the length of quotations in my PowerPoint presentation. Since mine will be a literary biography, which means I'll be reading her unpublished papers through her published writing, I begin by reading a passage from Park's novel, The Harp in the South. This novel, which won the inaugural Sydney Morning Herald Literary Competition in 1946 and was first serialised in its pages in January 1947, offers a glimpse into the rich tapestry of Irish Australian life in Surry Hills at the time. The passage is from a chapter of the novel where the character Dolores Darcy participates in a radio quiz. And through this passage, we witness the intricacies of Darcy family dynamics, but we also get a glimpse of the spirit of a fictional version of Park, a young woman who not only exhibits determination in the face of adversity, but possesses a certain ingenuity. In the passage concerned, Dolores, the younger daughter of Hughie and Mama Darcy, is a contestant on Radio 2MB's quiz session, Junior Information, Please. During the morning leading up to her participation in the quiz, Dolores is chirpy and optimistic. She, quote, felt that she knew quite a lot. Bits of information of little use to her or anyone else stayed obstinately in her brain, and often she could have answered questions at school very well if only sister had given her enough time to find words to wrap up her knowledge, unquote. While her father Hughie is terrified she will fail and bring shame to the family, Mama encourages her, and older sister Rowie lends Dolores a pink blouse to wear. However, all of Dolores' initial confidence drains away when she steps up to the microphone. Before they knew where they were, Dolores was standing in front of the microphone, a thin, badly clothed child with bony legs and a sliver of white petticoat showing above them. The pink blouse looked ludicrous. Rowie blushed for shame, and Dolores' mousy, white face looked even worse. "Closer, please," said the announcer. Dolores stayed still. "Now," said the compere pleasantly, "will you have sport, music, history, or general knowledge?" "Eh?" squeaked Dolores faintly. "Don't say eh, say what?" cried some jokester from the audience, and Hugh, fighting his way out of the folds of soft flesh that billowed upon him, shouted, "Shut your big gob and give the kid a chance." Meanwhile, the announcer, with a humorously despairing shrug at the audience, had repeated his question. Dolores whispered, "General knowledge." The announcer looked up and down his list of questions. The jackpot was £3, and he did not want to lose it to this trembling child, but rather to one of the pert, red-faced adolescents who would be good for a bit of repartee and slick gaggery. He found a nice, simple-appearing question and put it to her bluntly. Ruth Park was born in 1917 in New Zealand, spending formative years of her life living with her parents in what was then a relatively uncultivated, densely forested region of the North Island. Park's father was an engineer of Scottish ancestry who built roads and bridges. Between the ages of 3 and 6, while her father was working in the area, Park lived with him and her mother in a tent in the King Country area, which is located west of Auckland. Park's family endured financial hardship during the Depression, influencing her depiction of poverty in her characters. Dolor, a familiar Parkian type, navigates her struggles with resilience despite assumptions made about her by others. She embodies a recurring theme and a type in Park's work, an intelligent young woman overcoming adversity through resourcefulness and determination. In the case of Dolor, this determination is associated with her low-class status, and this predicament comes through in Dolor's speech. The stigma attached to Dolor's speech is vividly portrayed when, in response to the radio compare's question, a member of the audience interjects with, "Don't say A, say what?" This exchange highlights the class disparity, with Dolor's simple response reflecting her working class roots, while the retort underscores the perception that her speech lacks refinement. In this context, the microphone is a powerful symbol because it amplifies the prejudices surrounding Dolor's class and education. I find intriguing parallels between the fictional character Dolor and the author Ruth Park. While Dolor's act of stepping up to the microphone is vividly portrayed in Park's fiction, Park herself has underscored her affection for the tools of her craft, the printing press, paper, and ink, revealing a profound reverence for the machinery of her writing vocation. This distinctive perspective shines through in a 1993 interview where Park draws parallels between her love for writing materials and her father's fondness for machinery. Here, Park not only highlights her identification with her father, which she professes elsewhere, but also illuminates her linking of writing with other forms of creative labour, including tasks often regarded as commonplace or workmanlike. Likewise, in her correspondence with Nyland, Park underscores the creative power of writing in fostering their bond, a departure from the typical portrayal of female writers facing barriers in their relationships with men. For Park and Nyland, letters serve as the foundation of their connection, where they not only express their love, but also pledge mutual support and equality, creating a distinct space for understanding and solidarity. Quote, "From my earliest days, I was a kind of writer," unquote, writes Park in her memoir, A Fence Around the Cuckoo, 1992. As a child, Park wrote on butcher's paper on the back of the kitchen door of the family home, and her first published writing appeared in the New Zealand Herald's children's page when she was 11. In 1935, at age 18, Park secured work as a copy holder in the reading room of the Auckland Star. A copy holder, also known as a reading boy, is a proofreader's assistant who reads the copy aloud to the proofreader. In Park's words, at the Tory and imperialistic newspaper she worked for, she was paid 3/5 of what her male peers were paid. But Park let neither the material inequalities nor the conservative politics of her workplace bother her too much, because this was the place where she accessed the tools and learned her trade. What interested me was textual style, writes Park in her memoir, and thousands of lessons did I receive from the sub-editor's slashing and clarification of reporters' copy. During this time, Park received a letter from a Sister Mary Laurentia, a Catholic nun from Australia who had temporarily taught at Auckland's St. Joseph's, where Park had been schooled from age 7. Park and sister Laurentia had stayed in contact after the latter had returned to Australia. In a letter dated 8 August 1937, Sister Laurentia wrote to Park regarding an ex-pupil of St Joseph's, Glen Innes, in northern New South Wales, named Darcy Nyland, suggesting that Park might send this young man, quote, a word of encouragement, unquote. Quote, poor lad needs encouragement and advice, wrote Sister Laurentia, adding that while he has a gift for journalism, he is, quote, very poor and his environment not the best, unquote. My name is Darcy Nyland, and I am fortunately or otherwise bent on a literary career, wrote that young man in the first letter of the correspondence. This letter was dated 23 August 1937, with the sender address of 65 Baronia Street, Redfern, Sydney. Quote, I was bitten by the writing bug somewhere about my 12th year, and since then no other class of work seems likely to appeal to me, unquote, writes Nyland. He continues that his education at Glen Innes was a primary one, that he had left school at age 14, and since then, quote, he had wandered and strayed like so many foolhardy youths. While his family were poor, Nyland's mother nurtured his intelligence, his curiosity, his love of language and words, buying him, in spite of her extreme poverty, a 9-penny dictionary that is held in the Park archive. Longing for education beyond primary level schooling, Nyland had become an autodidact. At 16 years of age, his family moved to Redfern, Sydney. He obtained a job as a copy boy at Sun Newspapers Limited. Nyland was thus in the same trade as the copy holder at the Auckland Star, to whom he had addressed his letter of introduction, requesting advice and encouragement. Quote, there is nothing to brag about, writes Nyland in that first letter to Park, except perhaps that I was considered eligible for a cadetship at the end of 9 months. Unfortunately, I turned 17, and as is the Depression custom, was dismissed to join the brigade of patch trousers and flapping boot soles. By age 19, Nyland reports he has had some success publishing in newspapers, various serials, poems, short stories, and miscellany. And this has helped keep the, quote, literary spark alive, unquote. Nyland concludes, now, I wonder if you can help or encourage me. I should hate to make an imposition of myself. Also, if I have given an impression of a braggadocio in these lines, then I would ask you to please discount it as false. I think that I have told you all. Now I can but lay my pen aside until I hear from you. Meanwhile, destiny mazes on, and though I commonly fear and doubt and despair, I cannot help feeling that I have something to give. If you can render me the slightest assistance, I shall be more than grateful. Nyland's request for Park's help is frank and direct. Given the relative equality that comes to characterize their partnership, I wonder how common such a request from a man to a woman would have been at the time. Not very, I suspect. The matter of writing, what it is and what it means, not least in gendered terms, is a feature of Nyland's first letter to Park. This focus on writing is also significant, given that both Nyland and Park are already bent on making a living from professional writing for newspapers, rather than for, say, a literary milieu. In this context, writing is very much an instrument. It is explicitly understood to be a tool of a trade, rather than simply a lofty ideal. Writing is also a medium that enables Park and Nyland's first encounter, their ongoing correspondence, their eventual marriage, and their successful careers. And just as an aside, in their future writing, to one another and in their journals, they'll continually refer back to Sister Laurentia. Attention to the significance of this writerly encounter continues on in their correspondence, with both writers drawing attention to at least three aspects of what it means to write in a way that is inextricable from the industrialized scene of newspaper printing. These three aspects are, firstly, what it means to write for a living. Secondly, what it means to write without the presence of the correspondents with whom one is gradually falling in love. And thirdly, the meaning of writing as a creative process. The latter, that creative process, is that quote unquote literary spark that gives Nyland the feeling that he has quote unquote something to give. In a letter dated 6 September 1937, Park responds to Nyland with a letter full of encouragement, advice, and sympathy. Quote, "Reading your letter, I thought that here was my own case over again. I am an inky frog in the largest inky pool in New Zealand," Park writes. Quote, "The writing bug hit me heaven knows when," she continues. "I used to scribble when I was 5, had my first story printed in a kid's page when I was 11, and nearly died with surprise," unquote. Park then provides a short history of her life, including her family's losses during the Depression and the obscure eye disease she contracted that left her temporarily blind and unable to read and write for several months, which is another crossover with the character of Delors in The Harp in the South. On recovery, Park dreamed about getting among the quote-unquote ink and paper. Quote, "Even if you are only the galley boy," she continues to Nyland, "you are still amid the ink, and you have the chance to wield that ink yourself someday," unquote. Just as Nyland invokes a literary spark in his first letter, Park emphasizes the joy of writing, even though she has experienced the precariousness and hostility of the newspaper industry. Such a spark or gift is, however, not enough, as Park emphasizes in her first letter to Nyland that journalistic training is essential to success. Beyond this first contact in 1937, the correspondence soon gains overtones of intimacy. By early 1938, Nyland requests a photo of Park and she one from him, while he teasingly begins to refer to her as a Dorothy Dix. In a letter dated 29 June 1938, Nyland wonders about Park's character aloud before asking her, "If I knew you in New Zealand, you wouldn't tell me half the things you have told me in writing. Or would you?" In another, he wants to know, "Would you tell me all this if I was sitting next to you?" Such curious thoughts about the specific kind of communication letter writing affords appear in further letters. In a letter dated 17 July 1938, Park correlates Nyland's handwriting with his character. And this is a lengthy quote. "This is a frosty blue day," from Park. "This is a frosty blue day, and I'm sitting out in the garden in a Daphne-scented air, knowing that I should be doing an article and writing to you instead. And it's fun. You're rather an odd personality, you know, Darcy. When I say odd, I don't mean that you are an illogical or distorted personality in any way, but you're so terribly distinctive. When I look at that unforgettable handwriting of yours, I always wonder if it's characteristic of you. Neat, yes, very. There's an artistry that's never exaggerated. Distinctive, those capitals and tails say, I choose this road and I shall walk it, as though their style was studied at first, but natural now. Original, definitely. Consistent, strangely enough, yes. That's made you out a person who has built much of his own character, and I don't think it's far out. I choose this road, and I shall walk it. Is that the battle cry of Darcy Nyland? I rather think it is. Loyalty to yourself, your ideals, and your character. Oh, I hope it is, if only for the reason that it is my battle cry too. In his previous letter, Nyland had speculated about whether writing allows the communication of secrets that would not be said in person. In this reply, Park inspects his handwriting as if she is reading his mind or body. There is more to be said about the sensuality of Park's reading of Nyland's handwriting and what this means in relation to her own typewritten scripts. That's for another time. You might have to read the biography to find out. Also intimate is the manner by which Park continues to offer him professional advice while expecting in reciprocation. Look on me as a friend, will you please? And your reinforcement for me too, Park writes. If I can kindle you, she writes further, you can support me. In an earlier letter dated 4 February 1938, Park had replied to a letter from Nyland that had included a sample of his short stories. Park apologises for the time that had elapsed since her last letter. Her life had become hectic. She had begun publishing her own journalism under a male pseudonym, and by early 1938, she had been promoted to editor of the Auckland Star's children's department. Words of encouragement about his recent job interview are followed in this earlier letter by praise of Nyland's stories. And she writes in this letter, when I read them, Darcy, I was shocked. That sounds rather awful, I admit, but I was. Their power and style was such an overwhelming surprise that it came into the category of shock. I had no idea your talent extended to that. I am not being unduly complimentary, I mean it. The construction and force and general makeup impressed me extraordinarily. Having praised while attending to the formal style and structure of Nyland's prose, Park tells Nyland that she had shared his stories with several co-editors at the Auckland Star, as well as with a magazine editor. She passes on to him that these professional readers believe his writing to be quote unquote brilliant, but these readers are also critical. His writing is too somber, wordy, and sophisticated, say these readers, striking but morbid. Nyland's writing would, quote, pass in America, unquote, but not in Australia or New Zealand. Significantly, Park places in quotation marks the words of another literary man with whom she had shared Nyland's stories. Quote, brilliant prospects, but too depressing a subject and too many unusual words. Simplicity is needed for the average newspaper and magazine reader for the obvious reasons that he hasn't very much brain, unquote. My sense of Park is that she would not say such a thing about readers. Nevertheless, Park can quote the condescending words of a quote-unquote literary man, knowing that Nyland will catch her meaning. The same letter goes on to lavish more praise on Nyland, while providing advice on how to succeed in this environment that can be hostile and prejudiced. Quote, you've got talent, so don't let your ambition die. The chance will come and you'll realise all you want. Keep on, Darcy, Park writes, while setting out the exact amounts paid per word by certain newspapers and magazines for syndicated text. On a level playing field with Nyland from the start, Park provides concrete advice while exposing Nyland to the benefits of the newsroom as a hard-edged place of stringent and rigorous training. In another letter, Park concludes with a poignant reflection on her deep connection to the newsroom, articulating a sense of belonging and joy that is palpable. Park describes the untidy pens, the tossed aside blotting paper, the rows of orderly morning's proofs in the trays. The lantern in the corner was grunting and chattering querulously, and under my feet the rotaries hummed to a standstill. All this was me. I nearly cried. It's funny being happy about such things, but I was, and I'm frightened that I'll lose it. I'm such a dunderhead, blundering, inefficient sort of creature in everything but this. I'd just crumple up and die if I lost it. Newspaper life, it enchanted me before I could read. I can never remember the time that I didn't want to write. Hot ink, lead, and the endlessly flowing stream of news. Oh, Darcy, how I hope that it will be yours too. I'm sentimentalizing again, and my typing's getting worse. So goodbye. Literals look so bad in an embryo proofreader. Best of luck, my friend, and sincere good wishes from Ruth Park. Do call me Ruth, please. Nobody with hair as red as mine ever attained formality. As she describes the scene around her, the ink-spattered walls, the worn floor, the desks marked with initials, she immerses herself in the environment, finding solace and identity in its familiar sights and sounds. Through her vivid description, Park reveals her unconventional devotion to the machinery of her trade, her affinity for the tools of her craft, from the untidy pens to the endlessly flowing stream of news, speaks to her profound passion for writing and journalism. By evoking the sensory details of the newsroom, Park invites Nyland to share in her enchantment with newspaper life and the intrinsic joy it brings her. There is a conspicuously gendered aspect to this awareness, particularly in the letter's postscript, which asks Nyland to call her red-haired self Ruth. Here, Park hints at what it means to be a woman in a masculine-coded world. It is the dominance of male workers, as well as the industrial rather than domestic nature of this environment, that codes it masculine. But there is something else at work here too. In a letter dated 16 March 1939, Park notes that Nyland is the only person she has met who does not think women inferior mentally, before telling him that, quote, I'm at home amidst the thump of machinery and the smell of ink and paper, quote unquote. This kind of self-reflection, one that hints at her oddness, her peculiarity as a woman who enjoys the machines and tools of her trade, crops up again in a letter dated 17 April 1939, in which Park communicates an incident to Nyland. Park had written a story about a low-class picker-upperer, in her words, and her boyfriend. She had shown it to a quote-unquote lady editor who had called it disgusting and told Park that she had, quote, no right knowing of people like that, unquote. Continuing on in the same letter, Park reflects aloud to Nyland that I realise that the popular writer will never be one who refuses to paint pictures in pastels and ladylike colours. Therefore, I swear I'll never be a popular writer if I ever get the chance at such a cost. It's queer. You can write stuff that is frankly dirty and sell it. You can write wishy-washy applesauce and sell that too. But tell the truth, which combines beauty and squalidity, and you're told you haven't any right to know about it. Darcy, I'm going to become a Bolshevik. But Park does go on to become a popular writer, and this letter hints at the fortitude she will need in order to achieve this popularity. Courage is needed in the face of the potential risk to reputation the quote-unquote lady editor weaponizes when she tells Park she has no right to know about certain things. Built out of her experiential awareness of the difference she brings to writing, Park's dedicated ambition generates what one reader would call her lusty realism. Park's dedication to writing also provides a context for her relationship with Nyland. From early in their correspondence, Park framed this relationship as necessarily equal, and it needed to be equal so that both parties could achieve their dreams of independence and adventure in writing. In the aforementioned letter of 16 March 1939, Park had touched on the meaning of their relationship, referring to it as a, quote, very sincere, inky comradeship, unquote. This letter is intriguing, not only for its depiction of the male-coded newsroom with its thumping machinery, but also for the way it announces Park's expectation of equality, even if it means being seen as odd, by which she means unfeminine, unladylike, by Nyland and others. Park's letters to Nyland consistently announce to him the unfeminine, in the sense of gendered unconventionality, of her ambitions. They also make clear Park's ambition to break into the larger Australian market. In a letter postmarked 26 June 1939, Park complains about the, quote, petty snobbery and ladylikeness of modern journalism, unquote, by which she indicated the operation of a binary in the male-dominated workplace whereby women are expected to behave like ladies. She goes on to state that, quote, she'll starve to death waiting for New Zealand publishers to notice her, unquote, and commenting that, quote, Australia has a more lively literary market and better wages, unquote. All the while, Park entices Nyland to embark with her on a partnership that will be like no other. Nyland reveals, in turn, that he is willing to embrace what she offers. In an impassioned letter written on 31 December 1939, Nyland describes at length the physical nature of his desire for her, before stating, also, I need you intellectually. And there should be equality of desire and understanding between us, mutuality instead of unilaterality. To conclude my discussion of the Park-Nyland correspondence, I'd like to highlight two final letters that underscore the emergence of an enduring love grounded in a shared passion for writing and the promise of mutual support. These letters, written after Park's 1940 visit to Australia, where she met Nyland in person for the first time and initiated contact with Australian publishers, mark a pivotal moment in their relationship. Their brief time together in Sydney in 1940 dispelled any lingering doubts expressed in their correspondence, solidifying Park's resolve to be with Nyland. As she returned to New Zealand after the trip, her heart set on a future with Nyland, their bond strengthened by their shared experiences and aspirations. Park later migrated to Australia and married Nyland in 1942. From this point, they worked and wrote cooperatively, making their living as freelance writers when others were saying it was not possible. As an arrangement that balanced concerted writing time with domestic duties and shared child rearing, the marriage was also a collaborative writing practice founded on mutual help that benefited each partner in particular ways. Park introduced Nyland to journalistic networks, rigorous editing practices, and disciplinary habits. Nyland offered Park, a risk-taking woman committed to realist writing in a male-dominated environment, the protection, support, and shared labour of marriage. Before that marriage, and before migrating to Australia, in a letter postmarked 25 August 1941, Park had written, "There is a restless urgency in the air, the pagan call of spring. I've been looking forward with a joyous longing for that spring, when you and I will be able to express this all to each other in the inarticulate way of the body and the thin word fabric of the mind. I feel, and I know you do too, that I'm a window of life. I can, when clear enough, be the medium through which others may see. This is the mission of the writer, surely, not to propagandize, which is to twist subtly the simplest things, but to depict good and bad as they are. But one is so damnably impotent to express the exquisiteness of life as it surges within one. Park's clear-eyed confidence in her capacities as a writer is here palpable. In her words, she is a writer who can, when clear enough, be a window of life. She is a medium through which others may see. These words echo those of an earlier letter in which Park had declared her commitment to writing the truth, the beauty alongside the squalidity of life. They also echo the Harp in the South's radio theatre passage, in which poorly dressed Dolor comes up with an answer in response to a compere who would prefer the, quote, slick gaggery and repartee of another, probably more well-heeled child. For Park, writing transcends mere slick gaggery or propaganda. It's a medium that extends from a place beyond words, a silent, inarticulate realm, intimately intertwined with the delicate word fabric of the mind. For Park, the primary importance of writing is unambiguously declared in a further letter she wrote to Nyland before migrating to Australia. In this letter, dated 11 November 1941, Park teasingly flatters Nyland, describing him as a, quote, sullen, reckless, generous, passionate, utterly Irish man, unquote. Park then declares her love for Nyland, stating that he, quote, means more than anything else to her, outside of the effort to transcribe life, which as a writer, I cannot place anywhere but first, unquote. This writing that transcribes life, this writing that is a window of life, comes first, even before Nyland, whom she has claimed as her utterly Irish man. Let us finally return to the radio theatre passage from the Harp in the South to see how Dolor, after she collects her wits, correctly answers the radio compare's question. What is a Dead Sea apple? The announcer repeated, just a guess, that's all we ask for, and winked at the crowd. All at once, Dolor woke up. What was the matter with her? She knew that question. She'd read it in a book once. Things flicked back into focus. She said firmly, it's anything that looks nice on the outside and is nasty inside. A real Dead Sea apple is fruit with a lovely red skin and a whole lot of slimy stuff inside it. Wow, cried the announcer, giving the audience the wave to clap. In the Harp in the South, we witness Dolor's resilience as she faces a challenge on live radio. Despite feeling overwhelmed and distant, she gathers her courage and responds with clarity to the compare's question about a Dead Sea apple. Her answer, while seemingly simple, carries layers of meaning, echoing Park's own quest as a writer, committed to revealing both the beauty and the ugliness of the world. Just as a Dead Sea apple appears appealing on the outside, but harbours unpleasantness within, Park uses this metaphor to explore the complexities of truth-telling in her writing. She navigates the fine line between revealing uncomfortable realities and risking criticism from those who would prefer to keep such truths hidden. This passage illuminates Park's keen awareness of the socio-economic dynamics at play in her environment and her determination to overcome obstacles through the power of her pen, her craft. As she weaves together her love for writing with her experiences and observations, Park forges a bond with her readers and with Darcy Nyland, a fellow writer who shares her reverence for the written word. Through their shared passion and understanding, an enduring inky comradeship is born, embodying the transformative potential of trust and connection in the realm of literature. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions now, and I'll just stop the screen share.
Thanks so much, Monique. I love that story of how the 9-penny dictionary was used and loved and still survive. I think that says so much about his desire to be a writer as well as something about her, that it's all been kept together. We do have a few questions coming through. If you have any questions for Monique, please just pop them into the chat feature in Zoom, and we'll get through as many as we can this morning. The first couple of questions coming in really relating to your process as a biographer and some of the decisions that you're making. So what was the entry point for you into this project? Did you love the books? Did you stumble across the correspondence? Did you have that moment that most academics really want to clutch onto, which is, nobody has done this, I had better get in quickly? How did you decide this was what you were going to spend quite a few years on now, isn't it?
Yes, and quite a few years to come. I won't be starting in earnest on the biography until next year, as I've got an academic project to finish first. Well, I read Park first when I was a teenager, as many Australian students do, and I loved her then. I revisited her later, and I really didn't read the Harp in the South novels until I was in my 20s. I loved them. And I also, simultaneously in my academic work, had an interest in the popular writer. A chapter of my PhD thesis is on a popular US writer called Fannie Hurst. And I was very interested then in the relation between writing and biography, especially for the popular writer, who in that period of time, the early to mid 20th century, tended to receive quite a bit of flack from the literary realm for not writing in literary styles. Either that or were ignored by literary critics. But I was always interested in that relation between what we do as literary critics and the popular realm. I didn't think about Park until I was asked to write an essay by an academic I loved called Noel Rowe, sadly passed away now, for Southerly Journal. And at that point, it was an essay on playing BT Bow. And at that point, I read her nonfiction book. It's a travel guide to Sydney called The Companion Guide to Sydney, which came out in the 70s. And I was blown away by that book. And I saw connections between what she's doing in that book and the way she revisits aspects of the rocks in Circular Quay in playing BT Bow, moving between the colonial past and the present in that fiction. And so that's when I realized that I had a further scholarly interest in Park. And I just started to tinker and reading bits and pieces. My main thing is US literature and film as an academic. But I started to think about her in terms of my scholarship. And I applied for the fellowship. The first time I applied was not on the basis of biography. I missed out that first time, but I kept going into the archive, and I had got permission from Park's agent, Tim Curnow, and from her son, Rory. And I started thinking, gosh, there's a biography here, and especially when I realized that there were only these very short biographical pieces on her. And so I approached them and discovered that Park had said before she died that she did not want a biography written of her. In fact, this is why she wrote a 2-volume memoir when she was in her 70s. so that she could write her life as she saw it before anyone else could do it. And yeah, amazingly, they gave me permission. And perhaps it's because I came through that road, through the literary, because in fact, that's what they were looking for. They were looking for a literary scholar who was also interested in biography.
And so that leads on to the next question that has come through. So there can be sort of a lot of excitement. It's not everybody who stumbles across something and says, I can be the first person to do this and do it really well. What special pressure does that bring, do you think, as the biographer, or does it give you a bit more freedom? Because, oh, you won't be compared to that other biography of Ruth Park. You can write this story and present it really as an introduction to her and her relationships and her writing. But is it easier
Yeah.
or harder?
I think it's both. Yeah, and I've thought a lot about this question in the last couple of years, especially. And I've now met Rory and I've had conversations with him and Tim about it. And I respect their decision that they expressly want a literary biography. They've repeatedly said that. So that is a good limitation, I think, because I am not a trained biographer, and I will fess up straight away, I'm not particularly a reader of biography. I'm interested in it as a genre, but I would not call myself an avid reader. So I feel completely like a novice. But something I love and respect about Park is, and Nyland both, is that, and I think this, hopefully this came across in my talk today, is that they perpetually approach writing as if they're coming to it each time for the first time, as if every time they just have this young spirit. And Park retains that even when she's an old woman who's lost her eyesight, but still touch typing on the keyboard to her friends and still writing her journal because she cannot bear a life without writing. She still brings that spirit of newness and verve. So I guess I believe in Park. I feel I do feel a bit intimidated by the mission, but I'm up for it, I think. And I'm just going to read some biographies and get. There are a lot of different literary biographies out there, and try to get some good examples to think about.
We do have someone who's watching you today. They're saying, I lived next door to Darcy Nyland and Ruth Park as a child for over 10 years. So if you're interested in discussing with them their impressions of the family with you, so I'll
Please
keep you
pass on.
anonymous. But yes,
Yeah.
I've just made a note of your contact details, so I will share them with Monique. And somebody is asking something really interesting about journalism. And specifically, why did Ruth Park move away from being a journalist and instead used her time working at newspapers to develop her capacity to write?
So the question is, she moved away from journalism as a profession,
Yes, but sort of
but
still used it as a nurse. It's almost like a nursery, isn't it? These big editorial offices, all these
yes,
going in to learn an apprenticeship.
yeah, and the 1,000 marks of editor's copy that taught her how to write. Well, she did move away and she didn't. Basically, when she and Nyland set up house together, hardly had any money. They'd been told by fellow writers that it's not possible to live on writing alone. They decided together to write 60,000 words a month so that they always had something in circulation. So this was a lot of writing, 60,000 words a month between them. And they basically said they would write anything within limits. So they did keep writing for newspapers, but they did so as not as paid journalists contracted to a particular newspaper, but as freelancers. So they wrote fiction, plays for television as well as the stage, for radio. Park's bread and butter for quite a few years was ABC radio, and children's stories was also bread and butter. But she also wrote lots of, Tim Kerno's number is over 5,000 essays for newspapers. I'm not sure how accurate that is. I believe him.
And feels slightly exhausting.
So break out in a sweat thinking about it.
Okay, well, that's probably a good place to stop asking you questions, or those essays that would daunt any writer, any academic. So what I'll do is thank you very much for your time and such a beautiful insight into what we can expect from you over the next few years in this really beautiful story between writers about each other and about their craft. Do come back next month. So on the 4th of June at 11 o'clock, we'll be here and with Johanna Ellersdorfer. And she brings quite a different perspective to her time as a fellow here at the library. She is a conservator by trade, and she was our Ross Steele Fellow back in 2022, working on Maurice Felton. So do come and hear all about that lovely colonial artist. Have lots of his paintings up on display in our galleries at the moment. And also our fellowships will open. So if you would like to be a Steele, Keesing or any one of our other fellows, do keep an eye out for applications opening this Monday, the 13th of May at 9 o'clock. And also, before I sign off today, we do have this series, Scholar Talks, which we have such a great audience for at 11 o'clock on the first Tuesday. We are on television because that's what we did during the plague and that's what you asked us to keep doing. But with many more scholars and fellows than we have slots available, if you have any ideas or any preferences about how you would like to engage with the people doing research here at the library, would you like more online? Would you like on-site things? Please let me know and we'll see what we can come up with. You can contact me here at the library, scholarship@sl.nsw.gov.au. Until June, I hope to see you on-site or online at the library soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.